Good evening and welcome back to Control Room. It is April 8th, 2026. We are coming from Marshfield Community Media Studios at the Marshfield High School. Happy spring. Did you enjoy that wild weather yesterday with the snow pellets and the grapple and the rain and the snow and the cold winds? Well, things are looking good for the next several days. It's going to warm up. We're going to be hitting 70 by the time we get into next week. And I want to tell you, there is so much going on in the town of Marshfield. And there is so much going on in the world today that it is talking to other people and thinking about it myself. It's really hard to feel steady these days with so much going on. There's so much going on, and it affects people. And just in Marshfield, we have major issues, and any one of these issues would be a big story for weeks at a time. But we've got like 4 major stories going on right now in Marshfield. And again, keep in mind, relating the national issues to the local issues, the lesson of Control Room is if you want to understand what's happening in Washington, look at what's happening in Marshfield and vice versa, because we're talking human nature. Now, the big items or articles, things that are going on, we've got town meeting coming up. Don't forget, April 27th, that's a Monday, 7 p.m. at the high school. Come to town meeting, all right, April 27th, and also come to town meeting again on Monday, June the 15th at 7 p.m. Again, both at the high school. The reason why we have 2 town meeting sessions is because the first session on April 27th, we're going to deal with non-budget items. We're going to talk about Community Preservation Act projects. We're going to talk about changing the select board from 3 members to 5 members. We're going to talk about rescinding the MBTA zoning that we put into effect here in Marshfield. We should get it off the books so much going on. And between those things, we have town elections. Saturday, May the 2nd. That's less than 4 weeks away. Yours truly is on the ballot for select board. Each of the 3 candidates for select board is doing some media outreach, and each of the 3 candidates, as far as I know now, will all be participating in candidate forums. There are going to be 2 of them at least. One will be April 20th on WATD radio, I believe at 7 p.m. There will be another candidate forum sponsored or put on under the Chamber of Commerce, Marshfield Chamber of Commerce. So a lot of opportunities for you to learn about the candidates, including myself. And of course, again, as I always say, when you see me on the street, stop and say hi. Hopefully you'll recognize me because I've got a beard these days, but we are entering molting season, okay, as we move out of winter. So this beard is going to shrink and eventually go away, and hopefully you'll still recognize me. Now, the big issues. We got the town meetings coming up, 2 of them, bifurcated or split. We got the election. We've got Trish Simpson resigning, so now we need to have an election for the filling of the empty seat created when Trish Simpson resigned. We have Eric Kelly being recalled again, and there's the recall petition. And I got to tell you, if you ever heard of something or experienced something called word salad, this is a great example. This should go into the textbook for word salad. And I can't read the whole thing, but let me just pick any sentence. As Marshfield Select, now this is sponsored by Sean Costello, who's the chair of the Marshfield School Committee, and Lara Braid, who's a member of the Marshfield School Committee. Let me read a sentence. As Marshfield Select Board Chair, Eric Kelly has engaged in conduct that demonstrates a disregard for the will and participation of the voters of Marshfield, period. Specifically, Mr. Kelly has unilaterally taken positions and actions related to the town's budget that effectively deny the voters the opportunity to weigh in through a ballot question. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more, but try to keep that thought in mind. Eric Kelly doesn't want people to weigh in on a question, okay? And he's in disregard of what the voters want. Well, that's why we have elections. If you have a candidate or somebody in office who's not going along with you or have the same viewpoint, then when his re-election comes up, you elect him out, you move him out, right? You put somebody else in. And about disregarding the will of the people to vote, Well, we're going to talk more about that. So we got the recall, we got Trish Simpson's resignation, we got the town meetings, we got the election, and we have the override. As you know, there are no solid budget numbers in place right now. So how can we vote for an override, which is a vote to increase your taxes? How can we vote for that when we don't know how much money we need, if we are to have enough money from some people's viewpoint? We just don't know what that number is. Let's hear how some of the local media covered a recent meeting of the Marshfield Select Board. This past Monday, the Marshfield Select Board met, and on the agenda were two items at the top. One was to discuss and vote on a special election to fill the seat vacated by Trish Simpson's resignation. Now, there's a procedure for filling a vacant seat. It's very strict. It's in black and white. Okay, you can't deviate from it. We don't have all the information we need right now to call for that election. The second item that was on the top of the list was a discussion and vote on putting a override question on the ballot. Now, both of those agenda items were discussed, but there was no vote to do anything with them. And let's hear how local media on WATD reported on that meeting and those issues.
The Marshfield Select Board members held off on giving a date for a special election and did not take action on a budget override ballot question. Christian Maitre has more.
The now two-person Marshfield Select Board decided to wait to set a special election for its vacant seat due to a recall filed against Chair Eric Kelly. Kelly explains.
My look at it is that as I try to be fiscally responsible to the town, I'd like to see how that recall goes first before we schedule any elections, because if the people that get the signatures, which I hopefully they're not, get the signatures, then we'll hold two elections on the same day if that's possible.
The recall's petitioners, School Committee Chair Sean Costello and Vice Chair Laura Brait, will need to get signatures from at least 15% of voters in each precinct to pass the recall. If the recall passes, Kelly will be forced to call an election for his position or resign. With no tie-breaking vote, the Select Board was unable to vote to take action on whether to add a budget override question to the ballot box. Kelly was opposed, while Select Board member Stephen Darcy was in favor. Darcy explains.
I would say that Eric has made his position clear at previous meetings. I was looking to, try to make my position clear again tonight and get a vote on the record, but he's previously stated in meetings and in interviews that he is not putting the override on the ballot. So if it's a 1-1 vote, it dies.
Darcy said without a third Select Board member, this voting gridlock could continue.
So now we're in a situation where for the remainder of my term, it's going to be a 2-member board, and then whoever is elected on May 2nd, the board could continue to be locked in 1-to-1 votes for potentially 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks and not be able to get town business done because there's no tie-breaking vote.
Now, look at this. We've got 4 elections we have to conduct. We have to conduct the regular annual election on May the 2nd. We have to possibly, conduct a recall election for Eric Kelly. We have to conduct a special election to fill the seat vacated when Trish Simpson resigned. And we have to conduct a 4th election to vote on an override. Now, each time you run an election, it costs thousands and thousands of dollars. Eric, even though he's been just hammered and mercilessly persecuted by opposition forces without any good reason, in my opinion, okay, he's still concerned about saving the town money. He said, okay, if I get recalled, then maybe we can combine my recall election with the override vote or with one of the other elections, but not May 2nd. May 2nd, it's too late to do anything about that. Under state law, you can't schedule any other vote on May 2nd. You can't add things to the ballot right now. It's too late. And the mobs that were descended on Town Hall thought they were going to get the Select Board to put an override ballot question on the May 2nd ballot when we don't even know what the number would be for the override. Well, the Select Board was accommodating in a sense that they said, okay, we'll put 3 override numbers on the warrant. Oh, okay. So what did they do? They put 2 override numbers basically on the warrant, 2 override budgets on the warrant. And when you ever want to have an override, you have to have a budget for it. And it's called a contingency budget. In other words, a budget that is contingent upon the passage of an override question at the ballots, at the ballot box, at the polls. We don't have that number yet. And in the warrant that was printed, they printed two tables. One table is a cut budget, a reduction of the budget. In other words, instead of spending the amount of money that we have available, they list it as a level budget, but it's actually, the numbers are smaller than the actual numbers that we have available to spend. And then the second budget, which they call a $4 million override budget, they print it as a $123,941,382 budget. Now that's the amount of money we have to spend. It's not a $4 million override, but they list it in the warrant as a $4 million override, which is false. So what do? They attach paragraphs after those charts showing just general statements that say, should we increase the budget by $4 million, and then the second option is, should we increase the budget by $7 million? But you can't legally produce a vote on an override contingency budget if you don't have the budget. Now again, the number of $123 million plus is based on revenue projections, and the revenue projection sheet shown in the warrant says that for fiscal 27, that's the year coming up that we're going to vote on, we have $123,894,123, which is within $1,000 of the number, but still different from the number on the chart I just showed you. So we don't have a legitimate contingency budget for any override in the warrant right now. And at the same time, Sean Costello and Mr. Sullivan and Lara Brait are all clamoring for us to immediately put a ballot question or schedule a ballot question on an override onto the ballot. Now, you can't do that. You can't do it if you don't have a contingency budget, okay? And according to the rules for Proposition 2.5 overrides, the only person or the only board that can put a ballot question or put a question on the ballot to vote for an override, in our case, is the select board. Nobody else, not you, not me, not an angry mob with torches and pitchforks can put an override question on the ballot, only the select board. According to the state rules, a contingent appropriation vote does not place a question on the ballot. So the people got, or the select board decided under pressure to say, okay, we'll have two overrides on the warrant. One is a $4 million override and a $7 million override. But guess what? They weren't properly put on the warrant. So just doing that doesn't mean you're going to get an extra $4 or $7 million for the town to spend, because you still need a contingency budget. And that has to be voted on at town meeting. And if you want information, if you're computer literate, just go to the Commonwealth of Mass, mass.gov/info-details Proposition 2.5, or mass.gov/doc Proposition 2.5, or basically just Google Mass DLS Proposition 2.5, and there are loads and loads and loads of slideshows, video presentations, PDF files that'll tell you what I'm telling you right now, is that only the select board can decide to put that ballot question at the polls. And this is local media covered this issue. That was the report from Christine James. And now what I want to talk about next, one of the other big issues. So the select board, Eric wants to wait, like I just said, to see how these 4 elections can mesh and fit in, and how it can be done more efficiently. All right. And in the meantime, and one of the things he wants to know about before he makes any big moves is whether or not he's going to be on a recall ballot. All right, that's within his power, it's within his purview, within his duties to make decisions to put these items on the ballots. The issue is, again, because we only have two members left on the select board after one resigned, and you need majority votes, or in some cases two-thirds votes, which is in our case 2 out of 3, a majority, to make these things happen, to put these things on the ballot. If Eric doesn't agree with Darcy, then, and they vote different ways, then there's no majority. They both have to be voting the same way to deny something or to approve something, but at the same time, a tie vote is a failed vote. All right, you get the picture now of the situation that we're in, okay? Now, Eric's, the push by Sean Costello and Lara Brait to remove Eric through a recall ballot is basically word salad. If you read this thing, you can see it's word salad. This was started after Eric Kelly and the rest of the select board, before Trish resigned, they knew that they couldn't put an override question on the ballot. In fact, Bob Galvin, the town council, said at that meeting that no, you are not voting on an override ballot question tonight.
You don't have to vote on the override ballot tonight for June. Anybody give me a date yet?
32 days before June, that Saturday.
So, but it's going to be the same. You know, whatever you tell me to put in for this budget, that's going to be your override. Choices.
Yeah, so that's what I want to make sure, because people are saying, well, we could change that town meeting. You can't change that town meeting. Once we vote on this, these numbers are
You can reduce it at town
We're
meeting.
having that additional town meeting.
I know that, but with the override,
Right.
this won't, according to state law, what Charlie gave me, is that once we vote on this, this is a ballot question. It's not going to a town meeting. What's that?
No ballot question tonight.
No ballot question tonight, correct. But if we're voting on this as an override, okay, it doesn't go at the floor of town meeting to discuss, to my understanding. It goes right to the ballot, the
Yep.
way the law is written. Am I correct about that?
Yes, you are.
Thank you.
This will go on the ballot in June.
This is what-
You're not voting to establish an override election on May 2nd tonight. You're going to do that 35 days before the 20th of June or thereabouts.
And if there's a tie vote on the select board, then that question can't be put on the ballot. And if you don't have any clue as to what the numbers should be, and you're going to read the language of the override ballot into the record like the state law tells you to do, why in the world would you be talking about putting an override question on a ballot? And in our case, they were already behind schedule. In other words, you need 35 days from the time of the override question vote to when it's announced, and it just wasn't 35 days. From the time of that meeting to May 2nd, there was not enough time to put it on the May 2nd ballot. It was too late. So the smart thing to do is to let the advisory board get their final numbers, let people see the final numbers, and come to an idea as to what potential overrides we could be facing, all right? That is the smart thing to do. Now, at the select board meeting on this past Monday night, April the 6th, there was more discussion about the override, and the public comment period was rich. There was a lot of wonderful commentary from citizens, and again, public comment is open to anybody. You have to get there and sign up, and you get to speak. They take the speakers off the list, and we had some wonderful commentary from concerned citizens. And here's one in particular I want to highlight from Pam
This
Keith.
board, the select board, just voted at the last meeting to add a 3C option to the warrant, which was already closed. The opening and closing dates were already passed. This conversation was not on the agenda at all. That's an open meeting law violation. The language that was voted that night for the motion was to have Charlie present a budget at town meeting. There was nothing about inserting an article into the warrant, yet the warrant has been changed from those prior iterations because I have a copy from somewhere in February. The warrant looks different in the budget section than it was ever planned to be. This is an open meeting law violation. I'm going to file a complaint in the next couple of days. I hope to get that 3C talk nullified.
See, what happened was, again, the select board at that meeting we played previous to that, back on the 25th, said, okay, Charlie, have it put into the warrant that there's going to be 2 overrides for $4 million and $7 million. Now, the so-called $4 million budget, as we were talking about, does not contain an additional $4 million. It contains the amount of money, $123 million plus, that is equal to the revenues that we expect to have available to spend, not even including free cash, which is at $3.8 million, and not including any other possible income that we could possibly be getting. So they're calling the $4 million override budget in the warrant, it's already in hard copy, as the $123 million, and it's false. And as far as and there are lines, there are boxes, there are charts showing a rough breakout where the money would go, but there's no chart, no contingency budget for, if you can't even call that a contingency budget for the alleged $4 million or purported $4 million override, but there's no such thing for the $7 million override. All there is a little box at the back of this called Article 3C, Second Contingency Budget, and it says, will the town vote to raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds the sum of $7 million to supplement the annual town budget? But it doesn't contain a contingency budget. And the only thing that was said at the meeting by the select board was to ask or to direct Mr. Sumner to inform the voters at town meeting of the $7 million override budget. They didn't even vote to put it on the warrant. And it's not on the warrant as a contingency budget. It's on the warrant as what is basically an invalid paragraph saying just just collect another $7 million from the taxpayers of Marshfield. They've got plenty of money, all right? It's a cup of coffee a day, whatever it says, some gobbledygook here, more word salad, and it's not legal, it's not valid. And Pam Keith made the point right there, and she even made a point of order about it when Steve Darcy started referring to that budget option as something that was valid and in place.
So there are no override votes on the warrant. People don't vote on an override, they vote on budgets, and the budgets are missing. That's when I said there were problems with the warrants, that's what I meant. There are no budgets to vote on. So, a lot of confusion. That's my point. There are no budgets, and we keep saying there are A, B, and C options, and that's not true.
So under pressure from the mobs that showed up, that were incited by an unbelievably inflammatory message from Sean Costello about 50 teachers being fired, school closed, cancellation of classes, cancellation of extracurricular activities, all this doom and gloom. With all that, they got all excited. They showed up at town hall, and they must have watched the meeting with Chief Tavares last summer, okay? And they learned from that. If you get a big crowd in there and you hoot and holler, then people are going to give you what you want, all right? That's what they must have learned. These people need to take civics lessons, okay? I thought high school students needed civics lessons. I think some of these teachers need civics lessons. And I got nothing against teachers, a lot of them in my family. But this crew was incited and told that and now I'm hearing talk that students, that the buzz inside the classrooms and halls that the students are picking up is the teachers being disgruntled and getting the message to the students basically, in effect, go home, tell your parents that the school's going to close or some drastic thing is going to happen, which is unethical, okay? So this is how Marshfield did it. They put a very flimsy table here. They threw in 2 paragraphs, Article 3B and 3C, which really don't have any substantiation. You don't know what you're voting on, where the money's going to go. But I thought we had 2 very experienced interim town administrators with decades of experience and legal knowledge between the 2 of them, and they couldn't do this properly. And now the select board is being blamed when it is the job of the administrators to do this. Well, guess what, folks? You don't have to reinvent the wheel. This kind of contingency budget and override was handled recently by Duxbury, actually over the last 2 years. This is Duxbury. This is how it looks. They have line items. They have a department by department breakdown of salaries, expenses, which is how our annual budgets are always presented, but not this time. Why? Didn't Mr. Moran and Mr. Sumner know that there is a proper way to do this? Didn't Bob Galvin, our town council sitting there, know that this was the proper way to do this? My question has been over the last year, why are they leaving Eric Kelly and Trish Simpson out to dry, letting them swing in the wind? Why? What is behind all this? Well, politically speaking, I have my opinions about that, okay? This is about them, about the turnover of 3 straight select board races where the incumbent was removed, 3 straight years. This is the empire striking back. This is them fearing loss of control. There's no question about it, all right? There has been a club, basically, and you're not in it, that runs Marshfield politics, all right? This is the cool kids club, all right? Is it the Democrat Party? Not exactly. But is the Democrat membership prominent throughout this leadership that's been controlling Marshfield for so long? Wasn't Mike Maresco chair of the Marshfield Democrat Town Committee, right? I could go on and on about all the officials that are members of the Democrat Town Committee or are or have been, okay? So whatever the source or the nexus or the gathering point for this power that has been running Marshfield, they are scared of losing power. And so now they're striking back. So those are the 2 warrants. I showed you ours. I tried to point out where the flaws are. Duxbury's example, as you saw an example of one of their sheets, shows you the proper way to do it. And yet our interim town administrators, making, I don't know how much we're paying them, couldn't get it done right. And they let Eric Kelly and Trish Simpson swing in the wind. And Trish Simpson reached her point of tolerance, and she just couldn't put up with it anymore. So the override contingencies that they're saying that we're going to have to vote on really amount to blank checks until we have more knowledge. You just can't, in good conscience, and using some logic and financial responsible approach, just go out and demand we have an override. We have an override question on the ballot. And again, this recall petition is all about that issue. And I'll read a couple of sentences from it again. Mr. Kelly has taken positions and actions related to the town's budget that effectively deny the voters the opportunity to weigh in through a ballot question. Mr. Kelly has publicly stated on multiple occasions that he will not support or allow an override ballot question that would permit the voters to decide on critical budgetary matters. He never said that. That's their interpretation, that the ballot is there to permit voters to decide on critical budgetary matters. That's not what's happening. Nobody knows what the numbers are. And again, as I pointed out before, the only people that can put an override question on the ballot is, in a town like Marshfield, is the select board. That's black and white in the town's in the state's regulations. Only the select board can put that question on the ballot. And you might ask why. Now, the genius of Proposition 2.5, again, is that it guarantees towns an automatic 2.5% increase in available revenues. It allows towns to hike up the taxation on real estate bills on property owners in a town. It guarantees that. And it also allows for other increases so that ultimately the amount of available revenues goes up by more than 2.5%. It includes new growth. If somebody builds a new house on a vacant lot, guess what? You can collect that tax. You can add that additional tax to the revenue stream. And all kinds of local fees that are collected, all can be spent by a town. So typically, each year, the amount of revenues in any town in Massachusetts go up more than 2.5%. In Marshfield's case, I think there have been years when it goes up closer to 4%. And say 4% of $100 million, if you pulled in $100 million from your taxpayers, primarily through the real estate tax in a town like Marshfield, the following year, you got 2.5%, you got an automatic 2.5% increase, and then you got new growth and fees on top of that. You will then have actually another $4 million to work with, so that instead of just having $100 million in local receipts and taxes available, you then add $4 million to that. You have $104 million to spend. But the beauty and the genius of Prop 2.5 is that you can then, if you need to really buy something, build a school, buy a fire engine, you can have a debt exclusion override, or if you feel that you want to provide the town with all kinds of additional, you want to make the student-teacher ratio, 5 to 1, all right? And if the town agrees that there should be no more than 5 students for every teacher, then knock yourself out and vote massive overrides to pay for all that additional staff. Or if you think there should be a police car on every street, knock yourself out, put a police car on every street, but it's going to cost you some money, okay? So the pressure, as I said, came down on Trish Simpson, and she had to go. She felt she had to go. And she did an interview with WATD after she resigned, and here's what she had to say.
I mentioned to you when I came in that what I realized by the school not being able to come to the table and make some concessions, I know the people that voted for me out there, they can't afford that $7 million override on their taxes. And so they might have been able to meet the school part way. And do I agree that they should be able to vote on it? Yes. But I don't think they could handle a $7 million override.
So you think they should have been offered at least the opportunity to do it, and it probably maybe would have been voted down? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, okay. Yes. And I would hope that people would start getting involved. That's one of the things I noticed in my year in there, even with my office hours and meeting at the library and the Council on Aging. People need to pay attention. And I know people are busy and they have little kids, and I totally understand. But some way people need to start paying attention. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to afford to live in this town.
Yes, Trish, and that's what got you elected, okay? That's what got you and the previous 2 select board members elected, because people were frustrated. And I always say that a lot of the frustration and awareness stems not just from what's happening locally, but what's happening on the national and international scene right now. A lot of anxiety creating stories and events that are occurring everywhere. So people's attention has increased. They have started to listen in more, and we have at times reached the critical mass necessary to make change, as, for example, at certain events at town meeting and during these elections. But again, what this all comes down to, and we played the clip of Pam Keith and is making public comment at the most recent select board meeting. But there was also, I want to check this, I got to share this with you. Like I said, there was several people that went to the microphone during public comment period and had something to say about the current state of affairs in the town. And one particular statement made by Steve Lynch, everybody knows Steve Lynch, here's how he closed out his remarks, and I don't know if you're going to be able to hear this, but if you can't, I'm going to play it on my phone. Here's what Steve said, and this really sums up what all this controversy and all this turmoil at Town Hall is really all about. Whoops. Hold on, let me get it here.
If you side with the recall mob and put them back in power, 15 seconds, Steve, you will be reinstating the very same self-serving people who got us here due to a decade of poor fiscal management. Right? If you side with the recall mob and put them back in power, 15 seconds, Steve, you will be reinstating the very same self-serving people who got us here due to a decade of poor fiscal management.
Now that's very well said, in my opinion, by Steve Lynch. if you side with the recall mob, you're basically putting the same people back in power that got us into the situation we're in right now. And we do know, if you look at the recall petition from the first attempt to remove Eric Kelly, and you look at the sponsors and the people that are out there collecting signatures and actively working on this recall, a second attempt at recalling Eric Kelly, and you look at the mobs that are, that storm town hall on these occasions, there's a lot of correlation, all right? Correlation that's provable anecdotally and provable on paper, which also correlates, curiously enough, to how many people appear to or are on record now as approving Rick Smith as candidate for Select Board to fill that open position on the May 2nd election for Select Board. There's definite correlation, and don't forget, Rick Smith started very, very early campaigning for Select Board, right at the time that we anticipated that Eric's recall election would occur. The first attempt to recall Eric, we were timing it out as to when he would have to face a recall election or given the option to resign. And isn't it funny that right at the same period, Rick Smith issues a campaign video that, well, it's obvious from the setting and the seasonal conditions that campaign video was ready to go and coincided with Eric Kelly's recall election, potential recall election first time around, which failed. They didn't get enough signatures. So again, as Steve Lynch said, this is all about that team, the club that you and I are not a part of, striking back, trying to get back into power, the same people that brought us to the condition, the situation that we're in today. And again, it was people like myself, the naysayers that they called us, that were always trying to raise the consciousness and awareness of the electorate as to what was happening in town hall, what was happening with your budgets, what was happening with personnel decisions, what was happening with contract awards, so many things over the years. And honestly, folks, I'm having a good time in the sense that I'm doing what I think a good citizen should be doing, right? But there is an element that is not so cheerful as I am. Here's Sean Costello at a recent school committee meeting.
We hope that you will all join us in advocating for our students and put pressure on Select Board Chair Eric Kelly to do the right thing.
On Eric Kelly to do the right thing. And the mood and the behavior of the mob that was incited to come to town hall, again, with letters and notices going out, 50 firings, schools and programs canceled, closed, et cetera, doom and gloom. That is the attitude, that is the mentality of the people that are striking back against a pure democratic movement, a movement that wants accountability, that wants change. And again, if you look at the lesson of control room, this is the kind of thing you see on the national level, right?
And if you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd. And you push back on them. And you tell them they're not welcome.
You're not welcome. Now, I'm not a newcomer to this. I've been dealing with it for over 25 years, okay? And I'm still dealing with it. And even as a member of the Housing Authority, as a commissioner on the Marshfield Housing Authority, I get a lot of pushback when I ask questions. It is ongoing. And when I try to protect the environment in my neighborhood, I get a lot of pushback. And people do not understand what I go through at times, okay? Just talk to me. Like I said, when you see me on the street, talk to me. Well, anyway, so Sean Costello even followed up his choice remarks with this.
And I apologize for the comment that I made right before our last speaker sounded snide to the Select Board Chair. I just want to make sure that that's noted, that the reason I make that comment is because when the schools brought folks to the Select Board meeting last week, or folks came to the select board meeting because the school raised the alarm about what would happen. We were blamed unfairly and unjustly for creating a tense atmosphere in the meeting. Yet a mob is the word that was used. And I teach the open meeting law and decorum in public meetings for a living. That's what I do to get paid, among other things. And there were many mistakes that were made at that meeting, including in one moment where I had to step in and make sure that an open meeting law violation wasn't blatantly made at that meeting. So
he was concerned about the open meeting law. Was he concerned about procedures? Was he concerned about legalities as outlined by the Division of Local Services at the state level? No. Did he know that, did he have the numbers that justified the scare tactics that he put out there? 50 firings, $4.52 million cut to the school budget. School budget goes up every year, anywhere from $1.5, $3.5 million. It goes up and up and up every year. The number of students goes down. 4.52 million in cuts? Cuts? Really? How can it be a cut when, as I showed you, the town is going to have an additional $4 million to spend next year, and it's included in what is the base budget, but what is called the $4 million override budget? It doesn't make sense. How can you say we're going to remove $4.5 million from the school budget when the amount of available money going up for everybody, and it's actually, they're showing the school department as getting $60 million compared to what they got last year, which was appropriated at $59 million. So they're going from 59 to $60 million. They're getting $1 million, looks like $1 million. And from what I've seen, it goes from 59 to 60, yeah. So they're actually getting an increase, but why are they saying they're having a $4.5 million cut? Is there possibly a decrease in the increase? That could be, because the school department says, according to this town charter, this town warrant book, that they were looking for $62 million for next year, and they were being told, according to this chart, that they would only get 60.4. So there's almost a $2 million decrease in the wish list. See, this warrant also produces what's called the wish list. Every department can put in a number, even if it's unreasonable, even if it's the fire department saying they want 4 new ambulances and the school wants to hire 10 more people, et cetera, et cetera. That's what the job of the town administrator is to take the wish list from all the various town departments and then reconcile it with the expected revenues, which is given in Appendix B of the same town warrant book, the Chartreuse Microbus book, at $123 million plus. So you've got to reconcile those two figures, those two numbers, and that's the job of the town administrator, and that's the job that didn't get done. So how in the world can you expect us to pass a $7 million override? Now remember, a $7 million forever override isn't just $7 million. You don't just get $7 million and then see how far it goes. It's $7 million additional dollars put on the taxpayers every year forever. And there is a sort of a compounding, because if the amount of available revenues were to go from $100 million one year to $107 million the next year, and then the following year after that, you take 2.5% of the $107 million, now you've got an even faster rate of increase in the amount of available revenues and an even faster tearing away of the money from your pocket. An even faster increase in your expenses, your household expenses, in terms of taxes owed to the town. Now, back to the election. Where do people come down on this issue with regards to this? How many people out there? I've been going to every single meeting I possibly can go. I've been commenting on this on social media. I've been doing these shows to try to help you get educated, to help you to understand what's going on. And I am not afraid to be in the mix because I've been at this for over 20 years in this town, advocating for the taxpayers, advocating for the protection of the environment, pro-education advocacy, being involved in youth sports programs and other activities. I'm not afraid to be in the mix, not at all afraid. And it's actually very fulfilling. It's very fulfilling, and I would invite you all to be in it. So when you start talking to your friends and start considering, who to vote for, I mean, just get a feel for what people are saying, like this.
Almost everyone asks me the same question. What's your plan to fix this budget mess in Marshfield? First, we need to protect essential services while also getting our finances on track and doing more with less. So town workers aren't just line items in a budget. They're the teachers who educate our children. They're the people who are plowing through this brutal winter. And they're the first responders who keep us safe. And they respond to us in our moments of need. It's simply irresponsible to balance our budget on the backs of these essential workers.
There's nothing being placed on the backs of essential workers. That's, again, you see the parallel between the memos and the statements put out by Sean Costello and Lara Brait, including this recall petition. You see the same language, the same mindset, scare tactics, this professed admiration and loyalty and advocacy for essential services. Well, of course, we all believe in essential services. But on whose back is the budget being balanced? It's being balanced on the back of the taxpayers, okay? The taxpayers who are not an ATM, who are already stressed out, who are already under pressure, who already are having to do their own cutbacks at home, who are already faced with a regular increase in their taxes from year to year. Are they getting raises? Who knows? Maybe some of them are. But that's, again, I don't like this kind of lip service that you hear from our officials and our wannabe officials, that somehow this is all being on the backs of some group of employees that are important, that are needed, that are necessary, and that for some reason you're expected to believe that all that's going to go away, all right? And that you're going to have to basically defend your own house and keep buckets of water handy in case it catches fire or something like that. It's really demagoguery, and it's pandering in my view. And there's no straight answers from your politicians and from your officials and from some of your candidates. There are no officials. It's like they're playing the word games with us, like you've seen this.
Captain, how soon can you land?
I can't tell.
You can tell me. I'm a doctor.
No, I mean, I'm just not sure.
Or can't you take a guess?
Well, not for another 2 hours.
You can't take a guess for another 2 hours?
No, I mean, we can't land for another 2 hours.
It's like a game. And this is the kind of thing that I've been talking about for over 20 years. This is the kind of response. This is how you're treated like a child, like in a sense like you don't deserve to know or that you can't handle the truth. And this is what you're going to get over and over again. And some people have a record. We know how they've handled these issues in the past.
I'm just having a hard time understanding how we would just tell them that we can't do it.
So where do we make the cuts?
Where do we make the cuts?
Correct.
Well, that's what I'm asking you. I mean, I'm not the expert. I don't, this is not my day job.
Yeah, well, I don't know. It should come pretty easy if you're managing $120 million a year business. So those are the main issues we're faced. Again, to recap, we have a town meeting on April 27th. Again, we're going to talk only about non-budgetary items, all right? We're going to vote on whether or not we should rescind MBTA zoning, which to me is a great idea. We're going to vote on increasing the size of the select board from 3 members to 5. And again, by the way, some of these votes, like increasing the size of the select board from 3 members to 5, is not a done deal. If town meeting voted to increase the size of the select board from 3 members to 5, it's actually the select board that has the final word. So the select board does not have to submit that vote to the state, because the way this is being approached, the way this is being handled, if town meeting were to pass that article, that motion to increase the select board from 3 to 5 members, it has to go through the Marshfield Select Board and passed on by them to our state representative, who then brings it to the State House and makes it a piece of what they call special legislation. And if the legislature signs off on it, then we get to have a 5-member select board. So voting for it at town meeting doesn't guarantee that it's going to become law, that's going to become part of the Marshfield law. That's one additional step that it has to go through. Then the meeting on June the 15th, as I showed you, also at 7 p.m. here at the high school, Monday, June the 15th, is going to be about the budgetary items. That's how we're going to spend money. And from that, if there is discussion about an override budget or an override contingency, which we don't have yet. I mean, as I said on a previous show, it may be possible for this warrant to be corrected. I don't know. There's some very hairy legal issues involved with this. And whether or not they can even do that at this stage of the game, if it's not too late. And that budget, though, will be discussed one way or another. And then there is the potential to schedule an override vote at the ballot. But that comes down to who's on the select board. Because I said already 5 times tonight, only the select board can put an override question on the ballot. It may be possible that we do need an override at some point in the future, because we did vote to join the South Shore Vocational Technical High School District, and there are additional costs. Weren't we lucky to join just when they decided to build a new school? So now we have to run the hook to help pay for the new school. The only possibility of relief at this point, and I'm not saying voc tech schools are a bad thing. I think people don't know what the curriculum is at the voc tech school. Some people have the misconception that once we join the voc tech school, all of our friends' kids and daughters are going to be plumbers and electricians, and they're going to be roaming the streets of Marshfield looking for something to wire or something to pipe, and it just doesn't work that way. You know, you're not going to have that immediate impact. Again, a lot of good programs at the voc tech, a lot of good people there, and that money that is going to be required from the town of Marshfield taxpayers to pay for the new voc tech school and to pay for each and every Marshfield student that elects to go to the voc tech school, if they can get in, is going to mean an extra, I'd say up to $4 million per year that we're going to have to come up with in order to pay for our participation in the voc tech school. So that's why I say it's not out of the question that an override, a small override, may be necessary in the future, but certainly it's not necessary at this stage, not this year. Again, the town election is on May the 2nd. It's a Saturday, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Those aren't very long hours. So make sure you make it to the elections on May the 2nd. And remember that, as like Steve Lynch said in his comments at the podium at the select board meeting, what's happening now, this recall election and all the other agitating that's going on, is really reflects what's happening in town in terms of a power struggle between the old guard, and you just saw a couple of pictures, I'll show them to you again. If you've been in town for any length of time, you know who these people are. That's Martine Anderson. Hi, Martine. How's it going? All right. There's Patty Epstein. Okay. There's Kathy Sullivan. This is an attempt a reaction to the election of mainly Eric Kelly and Trish Simpson. This is a reaction. This is the empire striking back. I would say there's a very, if you were to draw a Venn diagram, there's a very high correlation between the members of the Democrat Party and the people supporting someone like Rick Smith and others that will be coming down the road in subsequent elections. And this is what you have to be aware of. And you have to be aware that the naysayers, people like myself, have been at this for decades. The only problem is that most people don't want to pay attention. They don't want to be bothered. To them, it's too controversial. It gives them a headache. They want to punch somebody in the nose, all those kinds of things. And that is what it's all really all about, my friends. It's quite simple. So those are the main issues. I hope you learned something from all this discussion. I don't know if there's anything I missed, but I think I'm just overwhelmed at the time with all that's happening in town and with all there is to cover. And I will see you about, but I'm going to end the show right now. I got a lot to do. Happy Easter to everybody. Myself and my people close to me will be celebrating Easter this coming Sunday. And again, if you see me on the street, stop and say hi, and let's talk about it, okay? Have a good night, everybody.